The sun was rising slowly over the small town, painting the sky with soft colors of orange and pink. The streets were quiet and most people were still beginning their day. In the sheriff's office, however, there was a different kind of energy. Flyers were being printed, phone calls were being made, and an announcement was about to spread through the entire town. The sheriff's department had officially scheduled an auction for retired and reassigned police dogs. These were the loyal canines that had served the community for years, dogs who had risked their lives alongside officers to protect and save people. Among them was one dog everyone in town knew by name, Rex, the German shepherd who had belonged to Deputy Mark. Deputy Mark was not just another officer in town. He was the kind of man everyone respected. Tall, kind-hearted, and brave, he had served the community for many years. He was the person who volunteered to help children cross the road after school, who stopped to check on elderly neighbors, and who never hesitated to put himself in danger if someone needed help. People remembered him for his warm smile and his gentle way of talking, even in tense moments. And by his side almost every single day was Rex. Together, Mark and Rex had become a legendary team. People often said, "If you see Mark, you'll see Rex right there with him." Rex was more than just a working dog. He was Mark's partner and his shadow. Whether it was chasing down criminals, sniffing out dangerous items, or comforting a frightened child, Rex was always there. The children of the town loved to watch Mark and Rex at community events. Mark would sometimes let the kids pet Rex, showing them that although Rex was trained for serious work, he also had a heart full of love. Parents felt safe knowing these two were out there looking after the town. But one day, tragedy struck. During a dangerous operation, Deputy Mark lost his life in the line of duty. The entire community was shaken. The funeral was one of the largest the town had ever seen. People gathered in silence, tears in their eyes, as Rex sat quietly near the casket, refusing to move. It was a heartbreaking sight that no one could ever forget. Mark left behind his wife and his 10-year-old daughter, Emily. For Emily, her father's loss was more than just sadness. It was as if her whole world had been broken apart. In the months after Mark's passing, Rex was kept at the sheriff's department. The officers cared for him, but everyone noticed something different. Rex seemed restless, as if he was searching for the person who was no longer there. He often sat near Mark's old desk, staring at the empty chair, waiting. But Rex was also still young and strong, and the department decided he would be reassigned or sold at the upcoming auction. They thought it was the practical choice. Dogs like Rex were valuable, highly trained, and could continue working or be adopted by families who could care for them. When the auction announcement spread, people talked about which dogs they might bid for. Some wanted a guard dog for their property, some wanted a trained companion. Collectors were also expected to attend, people who valued trained police dogs as symbols of strength. But for most of the community, Rex was not just a dog. He was part of Mark's story, part of the town's memory. The thought of him being sold off like any other dog left a heavy feeling in many hearts. One person who felt this more than anyone else was Emily. She was only 10, small for her age, with big brown eyes that carried both innocence and pain. Since her father's passing, she had grown quiet. She didn't laugh as much as before, and she often sat alone in her room clutching a small picture of her dad. But there was one thing that always lit up her face: Rex. Every time Emily saw Rex, her eyes softened. She remembered the days when her father would bring her close, letting her pet Rex's thick fur. Mark would smile and say, "Rex will always look out for you, Emily. He's more than a dog, he's family." Those words stayed with her, carved deep in her young heart. Emily believed them completely. She truly felt Rex was part of her father, as if a piece of Mark's spirit still lived inside the loyal dog. And when she overheard her mother talking with a neighbor about the auction, about how wealthy buyers might take Rex away, Emily's heart sank. She imagined Rex locked in some faraway yard, lonely and confused, without anyone who understood the bond he had with her father. That night, lying awake in her bed, she whispered to herself, "I have to bring Rex home. He belongs with me." Emily's mother didn't notice the storm growing inside her daughter. She was busy working extra hours to make ends meet, trying to pay bills and keep their small home running. She assumed Emily's silence was just grief. But Emily had already decided on something bold, something no one expected. She was going to try and buy Rex at the auction. The problem was simple: she had no money. She was just a child with no savings or income. But Emily's determination was stronger than her obstacles. Over the next days and weeks, she began collecting coins. She did small chores for neighbors, carrying groceries, watering gardens, and sweeping porches. Some neighbors noticed her hard work and gave her a few dollars. Emily kept every cent, storing it carefully in a small envelope she hid under her pillow. To others, it seemed like a child's game, saving money for candy or toys. But Emily had a secret. Every coin she collected, every dollar she folded was for Rex. She never told her mother, afraid her mom would say it was impossible. The other kids her age were busy playing games and laughing, but Emily spent her afternoons planning how to save the dog she believed was her father's last gift to her. Word about the auction spread even wider. People whispered about how collectors from out of town would pay thousands of dollars for a dog like Rex. This made Emily even more anxious. She knew her envelope of coins and crumpled bills would never be enough. Yet she didn't give up. She kept saving, praying, and telling herself that somehow, in some way, she would bring Rex home. The day of the auction drew closer, and Emily's heart beat faster each time she thought about it. She imagined standing in front of all the adults, holding up her hand with her little envelope, trying to fight for Rex. People would laugh, she knew. Some might shake their heads. But Emily didn't care. She could already hear her father's voice in her memory. Be brave, Emily. Do what you believe is right. And so, with nothing but courage and a child's love for her father's loyal partner, Emily prepared herself for the day that would change her life, and Rex's life, forever. Emily woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The thought of the auction never left her mind, not even for a single moment. She brushed her hair quickly, tied it into a small ponytail, and ran to check the envelope hidden beneath her pillow. She counted the money again, even though she already knew the exact amount. A handful of coins clinked together, and a few dollar bills lay folded neatly. It was not much, not nearly enough to compete with adults who carried checkbooks and thick wallets, but to Emily, it was the most valuable treasure in the world. Her mother noticed her busy with the envelope and asked gently, "What are you doing, sweetheart?" Emily quickly slid the envelope under the pillow and smiled nervously. "Just counting," she whispered. Her mother assumed Emily was saving for a toy or maybe a new storybook. She smiled and patted her daughter's head. "One day we'll get you something nice." But Emily's eyes were serious. She wasn't dreaming of toys or books. She was thinking about Rex. At school, Emily found it hard to pay attention. While her teacher spoke about math problems and reading passages, Emily's mind kept drifting. She imagined Rex sitting alone at the sheriff's department, waiting for someone to take him away. The thought filled her with a sense of urgency. She scribbled in her notebook, not numbers or letters, but a drawing of a dog with kind eyes and a strong body. Underneath, she wrote, "Come home, Rex." Her best friend Sarah leaned over and asked, "What are you drawing?" Emily quickly closed her notebook. She wasn't ready to share her secret with anyone. This mission felt too personal, too close to her heart. She worried that if others knew they might laugh or tell her it was impossible. So she stayed quiet, holding her plan inside like a hidden flame. Every afternoon after school, Emily kept working. She offered to rake leaves for neighbors, carry their mail, or water their plants. Most neighbors already knew her situation. They had seen her at the funeral, standing bravely beside her mother, holding her small hands together as Rex sat near the casket. They admired her spirit, though they didn't fully understand her determination. So when she offered to do chores, many gave her a few coins or $1, sometimes more. "Thank you, Emily," they would say. And she would quietly add the money to her envelope, whispering in her mind, "For Rex." One evening, Emily's mother sat with her at the dinner table. The house was simple and the meal was just soup and bread, but Emily didn't complain. Her mother sighed, looking tired from long hours at work. "Emily," she said softly, "you've been very quiet these days. Are you okay?" Emily hesitated. She wanted to tell her mother everything, that she was saving money for Rex, that she couldn't imagine life without him. But fear held her back. She was afraid her mother would say no, that she would call it foolish. So Emily just nodded and whispered, "I'm fine, Mom." But inside, she was not fine. Inside, she was racing against time. The auction date was growing closer and closer. One Saturday morning, Emily decided to walk to the sheriff's department. She stood quietly outside the gate, watching through the fence. And there he was, Rex. The dog lifted his head, ears twitching as if sensing her presence. Emily pressed her small fingers through the chain links and called softly, "Rex." The moment Rex saw her, he jumped up, tail wagging wildly. His deep eyes brightened and he ran closer, pressing his nose against the fence. Emily's heart swelled. For a few moments it felt like her father was still there, watching over them. She whispered, "I'm trying, Rex. I promise I'll bring you home." Deputy Johnson, one of her father's old friends, noticed the scene. He walked over, smiling kindly. "Hey, Emily, you miss him, don't you?" She nodded quickly, trying to hide the tears that threatened to fall. Johnson crouched down, looking her in the eye. "Your dad loved this dog. Rex was more than his partner. He was family. You know, Rex hasn't been the same since your father." His voice trailed off. Emily looked at him, her small fists clenched with determination. "Then Rex should stay with us," she said firmly. Johnson's smile faded a little, replaced with a thoughtful expression, but he didn't say anything more. That night, Emily lay awake, thinking about what Johnson had said. It only made her more determined. She didn't care how little money she had. She would stand in that auction hall, raise her hand, and fight for Rex. The following days seemed to rush past. The whole town buzzed with talk of the auction. Some people mentioned that rich buyers from outside the county were coming. They were willing to pay large sums for trained dogs like Rex. Each time Emily overheard such conversations, her chest tightened. She knew she couldn't match them, but she clung to hope. Maybe, she thought, maybe if they see how much Rex loves me, they'll understand. On the Friday before the auction, Emily visited the town store. She placed a few coins on the counter and asked the shopkeeper for a small notebook and a pencil. The shopkeeper, a kind old man with glasses, looked surprised. "Saving money for this?" he asked. Emily shook her head, clutching the notebook tightly. "It's for something important," she whispered. The man gave her the items and slipped in a piece of candy, too. "Good luck, little one," he said warmly. That evening, Emily opened her new notebook and began to write. She wasn't sure what she was writing, maybe a speech, maybe just her feelings. She wrote about her dad, how he used to kneel beside her and place Rex's paw gently in her hand, saying, "He'll always protect you." She wrote about the funeral, how Rex refused to leave the casket. She wrote about how empty the house felt without her dad, and how Rex was the only piece of him she had left. By the time she finished, her handwriting was messy, but her heart felt lighter. The day before the auction, Emily checked her envelope one last time. She had collected more than she expected, but still far less than what others might bring. She whispered to herself, "It doesn't matter. I'll still try." She placed the envelope carefully in her small bag and hugged it to her chest. That night, she dreamed of her father. In the dream, he was smiling at her, standing tall in his uniform, Rex sitting proudly by his side. "Be brave, Emily," he said gently. "Do what you believe is right." She woke with tears in her eyes, but also with a renewed strength. The morning of the auction arrived. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Cars began to fill the parking lot near the hall. People in suits, families with children, and serious-looking men with clipboards all gathered. Emily dressed in her best clothes, a simple dress her mother had sewn long ago. She held her little bag tightly, the envelope inside, and walked beside her mother toward the hall. Her mother still didn't know what Emily planned. She thought her daughter just wanted to see the auction, to say goodbye to Rex. But Emily's heart was racing. She wasn't there to say goodbye. She was there to bring him home. As they entered the crowded hall, Emily's eyes searched for Rex, and when she saw him, standing proudly yet looking around as if searching for someone, her heart nearly burst. His ears twitched the moment their eyes met, and his tail began to wag. Emily smiled through her nervousness. Whatever happened, she was ready. The hall was full of voices, footsteps, and whispers as people settled into their seats. The auction was about to begin, and the air felt thick with anticipation. Long wooden benches lined the room, and the smell of polished floors mixed with the faint scent of the dogs waiting behind the side doors. Emily sat beside her mother, her little bag clutched tightly on her lap. Her mother still thought they had only come to watch, but Emily's heart was thumping with a secret plan that no one else knew. On the stage, the auctioneer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began in a loud, steady voice, "thank you for joining us today for this important event. These dogs have served our community with loyalty and courage. Today, they will be given new homes where they can continue to live with purpose." The crowd clapped politely. but Emily barely heard his words. Her eyes stayed on the side door where she knew Rex was waiting. The first few dogs were brought out one by one. The auctioneer described their training, their age, and their abilities. Bidders raised their hands, calling out numbers as the prices went higher and higher. The sound of the gavel striking the podium echoed each time a dog found a new home. Emily tried to watch, but her hands grew sweaty. Each sale reminded her of what could happen to Rex if she failed. Finally, after several dogs had been auctioned, the side door opened again, and there he was, Rex. The German shepherd stepped onto the stage with steady steps, his black and tan coat shining under the lights. His ears were alert, his chest broad, and his eyes searching the crowd. For a moment he looked like a soldier standing proud, but then his gaze found Emily. In an instant his entire posture changed. His tail wagged, his eyes softened, and he tugged gently against the handler's leash. Murmurs spread through the room as people noticed the dog's sudden excitement. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around his neck, but she knew she had to stay in her seat. Her heart pounded louder with each second. The auctioneer raised his voice. Now this is Rex, 4 years old. Fully trained in search and rescue, obedience, and protection. He has been a key partner in many successful operations. A fine dog indeed. We will start the bidding at $1,000. Hands shot up immediately. 1,000! A man in a suit called out. 1,500! Another shouted from the back. 2,000! A woman's voice rang across the hall. The numbers rose quickly, faster than Emily could even think. She gripped her envelope so tightly that her fingers began to ache. She knew she had nowhere near that amount. Her entire savings was less than $100. But still, when her turn came, she would raise her hand. Her mother looked at her strangely, whispering, "Emily, what are you doing? You're shaking." Emily didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on Rex, who was pulling toward her, ignoring the strangers bidding loudly for him. The auctioneer called, 2,500. Do I hear 2,600? Another hand rose. 26? He shouted. 2,700? The room was alive with voices, the numbers bouncing higher and higher. Emily's chest felt heavy, but then she took a deep breath. She remembered her father's voice in her dream. Be brave, Emily. Do what you believe is right. Suddenly, in the middle of the shouting, a small hand went up. The room fell quiet for a second. The auctioneer paused, lowering his glasses to see better. There, in the middle row, was a little girl in a simple dress, her eyes wide but steady. Emily's hand trembled, but she kept it raised. A murmur swept through the hall. People turned in their seats, whispering to one another. Is that Deputy Mark's daughter? Someone asked. What is she doing? Another whispered. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. Young lady, are you making a bid? He asked gently. Emily stood up slowly, clutching her small envelope. Her voice was soft but clear. I have money, she said. I want Rex, gasps echoed through the hall. Her mother froze, realizing only now what her daughter had planned. Emily! She whispered, her face pale. But Emily didn't sit down. She took a step forward and held up her envelope with trembling hands. Coins jingled inside as if to remind everyone of her determination. The auctioneer looked uncertain. He was used to fast bids and serious numbers, not a child standing bravely with an envelope of pocket change. For a long moment no one spoke. Then someone chuckled from the back. She can't buy that dog with a handful of coins. The laughter was harsh, but it didn't break Emily. Her small shoulders straightened and she spoke again. He's not just a dog. He's my dad's partner. He belongs with me. The room fell silent once more. Even the bidders who had been raising their hands sat frozen, staring at the little girl who dared to stand in a place meant for adults. Rex barked suddenly, loud and sharp, breaking the silence. The handler struggled to hold him back as he pulled toward Emily, his eyes never leaving her. It was as if Rex himself was trying to say, yes, this is where I belong. The auctioneer cleared his throat, unsure of what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, he said slowly, it seems we have a very special request here. He looked down at Emily kindly. Young lady, would you like to tell us why Rex means so much to you? Emily swallowed hard. Her legs shook, but she took another step forward. She opened the envelope and held it tightly in both hands. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger as she spoke. My dad was Deputy Mark. Rex was his best friend. My dad told me that if anything ever happened to him, Rex would protect me. My dad is gone now. But Rex still remembers him. I need him to remember me too. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke, but her words were clear. The hall went completely silent. No one laughed now. Men who had been ready with thousands of dollars lowered their hands slowly. Women wiped their eyes with tissues. Even the auctioneer's voice caught in his throat. Rex barked again, wagging his tail furiously, pulling harder toward Emily. The sight was too powerful to ignore. This was not just about money, training, or value. This was about love, loyalty, and a bond that no one else could replace. Emily stood there bravely, her small figure glowing with determination, clutching her envelope of coins. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The hall seemed frozen in time after Emily's words. Every person, every seat, every whisper fell into silence. All that could be heard was the sound of Rex pulling at the leash, his nails scratching lightly on the wooden floor as he tried to get closer to the little girl. His eyes locked onto hers, and it was clear to everyone present that this was not just any dog. Not just any Bond, the auctioneer, a man who had spoken confidently through dozens of sales that morning, now looked uncertain. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and looked down at Emily. "That's a very powerful reason, young lady," he said softly. His usual strong, commanding tone had disappeared. Instead, his words carried warmth and respect. Emily held her small envelope tightly. Her hands trembled, but she did not look away. "This is all I have," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But Rex doesn't need money. He needs me. And I need him." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She reached out as if to pull her daughter back, but then she stopped. Something in Emily's face, something in her courage, made her realize this wasn't just a child's wish. This was her daughter's heart speaking. The audience began to shift in their seats. One man in a suit who had been bidding earlier lowered his head, rubbing his eyes with his hand. Another woman reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her cheeks. The sheriff himself, standing at the back of the hall, felt his throat tighten. He had served alongside Deputy Mark. He had seen how Rex worked with him, how the two were inseparable. He remembered the funeral and how Rex had sat faithfully by the casket, refusing to move. And now, seeing the little girl standing so bravely, the sheriff's heart ached with both sorrow and pride. The auctioneer looked at the bidders. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, "you've all heard this child. You've seen the bond between Rex and the deputy's family. Perhaps today this sale is not about the highest price." For a long moment no one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a deep voice broke the silence. "She's right. That dog belongs with her." All heads turned. It was one of the wealthy bidders, a man who had come prepared to spend thousands. He lowered his hand and shook his head firmly. "I won't bid against her." Another bidder, a woman in a fancy dress, stood up and said softly, "Neither will I." One by one, the hands that had been raised began to fall. People who had been ready to fight for Rex's ownership now sat quietly, moved by the little girl's love and determination. A ripple of agreement spread through the room. Emily stood very still, her heart racing. She couldn't quite understand what was happening, but she felt the energy of the room changing. For the first time since she walked in, she realized people weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. They were believing her. The auctioneer looked down at his gavel, then back at Emily. "Well," he said, his voice gentle, "I think it's clear. Rex is not going to anyone else today." He raised the gavel high and struck it firmly against the podium. "Sold to Emily." The hall erupted with applause. People clapped, some cheered, and many wiped tears from their eyes. Emily gasped, her small hands tightening around the envelope. "Really?" she whispered. Her mother covered her mouth, unable to hold back her sobs. She pulled Emily into her arms, hugging her tightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "you did it. You really did it." At that moment, Rex barked loudly and pulled free from the handler's hold. He bounded across the stage and leapt straight toward Emily. The girl opened her arms just in time, and Rex pressed against her, tail wagging furiously, licking her face as if to say, "Finally, I'm home." The crowd gasped and then clapped even louder. It was a scene no one in that hall would ever forget. Emily buried her face in Rex's fur, holding him as tightly as her small arms could. She whispered through her tears, "I promised I'd bring you home, Rex. We're together now." The sheriff walked forward, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. He placed a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. Your father would be proud of you, Emily. He loved Rex and he loved you even more. Today you showed the same courage he carried every day. Emily looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks but her face glowing with pride. Daddy said Rex would protect me, she said softly. Now he can, the sheriff nodded firmly. Yes, he can. And he will. People began to leave the hall, still talking about what they had witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled through tears, and many whispered that they had never seen anything so touching. The story of the little girl who stood up in an auction for her father's loyal partner was already spreading like fire across the small town. As Emily and her mother walked out of the hall, Rex trotting proudly by their side, people stepped aside to let them pass. Some even reached out to pat Rex on the head, smiling warmly at Emily. Take good care of him, sweetheart. One woman said, he belongs with you. Another man tipped his hat and said, that was braver than anything I've seen in years. Outside, the sunlight felt brighter, the air fresher. Emily walked with her head high, Rex's leash in her hand. For the first time in months since the day of her father's passing, she felt a piece of her broken world beginning to mend. She looked down at Rex, who stayed close to her, his steps perfectly in sync with hers. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. I didn't know, Emily, she whispered. I didn't know this was why you were saving all that money. I'm sorry if I ever doubted you. Emily leaned into her mother's side, still holding Rex's leash. It's okay, Mom, she said softly. I just knew I had to try. Daddy told me to be brave, Rex barked once, as if agreeing. His tail wagged, brushing against Emily's dress. The little girl smiled for the first time in what felt like forever, a smile that came from the deepest part of her heart. That night, after they returned home, Emily set a blanket in her room and patted it gently. Here, Rex, she said. The German shepherd circled once before lying down, his head resting near her bed. Emily reached down and touched his fur. We'll be okay now, she whispered. We'll take care of each other. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt safer than she had in months. Outside the window, the moon shone softly, and inside, a little girl and a loyal dog lay side by side, bound not by money but by love, memory, and the promise of a fallen father. The following morning felt different in Emily's home. For the first time in months, there was a sound that brought comfort back into the house. The soft padding of Rex's paws on the floor, and the gentle jingle of his collar as he followed Emily everywhere she went. The air felt lighter, almost as though her father's spirit was walking through the rooms with them, watching over his daughter and his loyal partner. Emily woke to find Rex lying close to her bed, his ears alert, his eyes on her the moment she stirred. She reached down and stroked his thick fur. Good morning, Rex, she whispered, her voice filled with joy. Rex lifted his head and gave a soft bark, his tail thumping against the floor. He seemed to understand that this was his home now, that his place was right beside Emily. Her mother stood in the doorway, watching silently. She had tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. For weeks she had seen her daughter grow quieter and quieter, carrying a sadness far too heavy for a child. But now, as she watched Emily smiling again, hugging Rex with all her love, she felt a sense of relief. The bond between the two was undeniable. It was as if Rex had been sent back to them not as a police dog, but as a gift of healing. Word of what happened at the auction spread quickly across town. People told the story in shops, in schools, and at church. Did you hear about Deputy Mark's little girl? They would say. She stood up in front of everyone and bought her father's dog with nothing but her courage. Many called it the most touching moment the town had ever witnessed. Some even said it was a story they would pass down to their children, a reminder that love and loyalty could be stronger than money. Neighbors began stopping by the house, bringing food or small gifts. Some came just to see Emily and Rex together. They would smile as Rex sat proudly beside the little girl, always watchful, his eyes sharp yet gentle whenever Emily was near. To many, it looked like the girl and the dog were healing each other. At school, Emily felt the difference too. Children who once whispered about her father's passing now looked at her with admiration. Sarah, her best friend, leaned over during lunch one day and whispered, "You were so brave, Emily. Everyone's talking about what you did." Emily blushed, but she smiled shyly. "I just did what my dad would want me to do," she said softly. Sarah nodded and squeezed her hand. "And you did it. Even teachers noticed the change." Emily seemed more alive, more focused, though she still carried her grief quietly inside. But now, with Rex waiting for her at home, she no longer felt the same emptiness that had weighed her down for so long. In the evenings, Emily and Rex would sit together on the porch, watching the sunset. She would talk to him as if he could understand every word. "Daddy used to sit here with me, Rex," she would say, stroking his fur. "He always told me stories about the people you both helped. Do you remember those days?" Rex would rest his head on her lap, his eyes calm as though he truly did remember. Sometimes Emily would close her eyes and imagine her father sitting beside them, smiling, proud of the bond they shared. One weekend, the sheriff himself came to visit. He arrived in his uniform, his face serious but kind. Emily greeted him at the door, Rex standing tall beside her. "I see he's already guarding you," the sheriff said with a smile. Emily nodded proudly.
"He never leaves me," she replied.
The sheriff crouched down and patted Rex on the head. "Your dad would be glad," he said softly. He always said Rex wasn't just a partner, but part of his family. Now Rex is right where he belongs. Before leaving, the sheriff gave Emily a small box. Inside was her father's badge, polished until it shone. Emily held it gently, her eyes filling with tears. "This was your father's," the sheriff explained. "I think he'd want you to have it. And maybe one day you can tell others the story of how brave both he and his daughter were." Emily hugged the box to her chest, whispering, "Thank you." Rex barked once, as if approving of the gift. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Life slowly became easier. There were still nights when Emily cried quietly, missing her father's voice, his hugs, and his laughter. But Rex was always there, pressing close to her, reminding her she wasn't alone. On those nights, she would whisper into his fur, "Daddy said you'd protect me, Rex, and you are." Rex seemed to take his new role seriously. He followed Emily to the bus stop every morning and waited for her return in the afternoons. He barked at strangers who came too close and wagged his tail happily whenever Emily's friends visited. He was not just her protector. He was her comfort, her best friend, and her connection to the father she missed so dearly. The town often saw them together, a small girl walking with a strong German shepherd by her side. People would smile, tip their hats, and sometimes stop to say, "He's a fine dog, Emily." She would smile back, holding Rex's leash proudly. "He's more than a dog," she would reply softly. "He's family." As the seasons changed, Emily grew stronger, and so did Rex's place in her heart. Their bond became the kind of story people told over and over again, about a little girl who saved her father's dog, and about a dog who, in turn, saved her. It was a story not of loss, but of courage, love, and healing. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, Emily sat on the porch steps with Rex beside her. She held her father's badge in her hand, feeling the cool metal against her skin. She looked at Rex and whispered, "We did it, didn't we? Daddy said to be brave, and we were. He's watching us right now. I know it." Rex looked up at her with steady eyes and placed his paw gently on her knee. Emily smiled, her heart full. For the first time since her father's passing, Emily no longer felt broken. She still missed him every single day, but now she carried his courage within her, and she had Rex to remind her of his love. Together they were writing a new chapter, one filled with hope, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a little girl and her father's faithful partner. And so, in that quiet town, the story of Emily and Rex became a lasting reminder. It wasn't about how much money you had or how big your voice was, but about the strength of the heart. A child had stood in a hall of adults, held up an envelope of coins, and shown the world that love could never be measured in dollars. And in the end, it was love that brought Rex home,